There's seasons in life where it feels like everything's falling apart at the same time. Relationships change. Your job doesn't feel right anymore. The future you thought you were building suddenly doesn't look the way you imagined. So you start questioning yourself, wondering if you made the wrong choices. You look around and you think, how did my life get here? But what if your life's not falling apart? What if it's redirecting you? Because the life you've outgrown has to become uncomfortable before you're finally willing to leave it behind. You know, what used to feel familiar, maybe it's starting to feel uncomfortable now. Places you used to fit into don't feel like home anymore. That could be terrifying because we've been taught to believe that if we don't know exactly where we're going, then something's wrong. But that's not true. Not knowing where you're going next doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes it can mean the old map just no longer applies to you. And that's where a lot of people turn around. They feel the uncertainty and loneliness and discomfort of becoming someone completely different. And instead of moving forward, they run back to what's familiar. Not because it was good for them, but because it's what they know. You know, the unknown, it can feel scarier than any unhappy life that you already understand. But there comes a point when you have to ask yourself, do I want what's familiar or do I want what's true to myself? And those two things are not always the same. You know, you could spend years maintaining a life that looks fine from the outside while knowing deep down that something inside you is asking for more. Maybe it's asking for more meaning, more freedom, peace, or authenticity. Not necessarily more money or more success. Just a life that feels like yours. Something, you know, and sometimes the beginning of that life doesn't feel exciting. Sometimes it can feel like loss. That's the part that no one talks about. You know, growth isn't always beautiful while you're going through it. Sometimes growth looks like sitting down wondering who you are without the things that you thought would always be there. It can also look like waking up and realizing you don't want to live the way that you've been living anymore. Maybe even admitting that the dreams you've been chasing aren't actually your dreams. You know, growth, it can mean walking toward something without knowing where the road leads. That takes an immense amount of courage. Anybody can walk the entire path when it's visible, right? But real faith is taking the next step when you can only see a few feet in front of you. You don't need to see the whole path. Just take that next honest step. That's it. Maybe that step is finally taking care of yourself. Or starting something you've always been afraid to start. Step could be finding the courage to walk away from a situation that you know is keeping you small. Maybe it's forgiving yourself for the years that you've spent just surviving. You know, it could also be learning how to sit with yourself instead of constantly running from yourself. That's hard to do, but whatever it is, your next step will probably not begin with something massive. It's going to begin with a decision. And internally, you realize you cannot keep abandoning yourself just because you're afraid of what comes next. But that decision that you're going to make is going to change your life. Because once you stop trying to force your old life to work, you finally have energy to build something new. And rebuilding takes time. You're going to have days where you feel powerful. You're going to have days where you feel powerless. You might take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. That doesn't mean you're failing. And transformation isn't linear. You're learning how to live differently, how to finally trust yourself to make decisions from who you're becoming instead of who you used to be. That process can feel messy. Let it be. Let it be messy. You don't have to become your highest self overnight. You just have to stop abandoning the person that you know you're capable of becoming. So, that being said, Start small. Wake up and keep one promise to yourself. You know, take the walk, make the phone call, write the page, apply the opportunity, set the boundary, have the conversation, whatever it is. Maybe you want to start the project. But do one thing today that the future version of you would thank you for. Because every time you follow through for yourself, you rebuild trust for yourself, and eventually something changes. You stop looking outside of yourself for permission. You stop seeking validation from everybody. You don't measure your timeline against anyone else's timeline. You start realizing this is your life. You know, you get to decide what you want to build from here. And your past can explain you without defining you. Mistakes, they can teach you without becoming your identity. The season that you're currently standing in right now, probably gonna feel very confusing because you're in between two versions of your life. The old one's disappearing, the new one isn't fully here yet. That space in between, it can feel empty. But it's not empty. This is where you're being rebuilt. You discover who you are when everything that you used to lean on is no longer holding you up. One day, you're gonna look back at this season a lot different. You're gonna realize the thing you thought was destroying your life was actually forcing you to finally pay attention to it. You know, doors that closed were keeping you from spending another decade walking in the wrong direction. The version of you that felt completely lost was actually closer to finding yourself than ever before. So if your life feels uncertain right now, don't automatically assume something's gone wrong. Just ask yourself some valuable questions. What's this season trying to show me? What no longer aligns? What am I being asked to release? And most importantly, who do I want to become from here? Move forward, create something that finally feels true to your heart. Give yourself permission to change. You know, you're allowed to outgrow the person that you used to be. Build a life that feels peaceful, meaningful, and completely your own. Just remember, you're not falling apart. You're finally breaking free. And maybe this isn't the ending that you thought it was. This here's your turning point. And if you're rebuilding your life right now, keep going. And if you want to be on this journey together, like and subscribe. We're just getting started. Love you. Take care.